are invisible. All right, good. Well, let's pray. Father, thank you for the opportunity we have to have Trinitarianism class today. Pray that you would open our eyes to behold the wondrous things in your law, that we'd see the glory of Jesus Christ in his blessed full deity as equal with the Father and the Holy Spirit. And I pray that you, Father, would, through Christ, by the Spirit, work in our lives to draw us closer to you, open up our understanding. Bless the students, bless those who watch the videos. And we pray that you'd strengthen me as I teach, that I would be effective in that. Pray this for your glory and through Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, well, we were looking at the deity of Christ in the Old Testament. If you take a look at Isaiah 9, we'll continue there. Isaiah 9:6. Remember that Isaiah 7 through 14 is the book of Emmanuel. So, if chapter 7 verse 14 identifies him as God with us, and then here in chapter 9, the virgin-born Messiah is going to be is further described. And so Isaiah 9:6 says, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called the Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace." So here we have a number of titles which indicate the Messiah's deity. Now, do you remember what the Watchtower does to try to get out of the calling Christ the Mighty God? How they try to say this doesn't show that he is truly deity, that he isn't truly Jehovah, he's something lesser, even though he's the Mighty God. It was pretty ridiculous, but...
Mighty all of the gods?
Well, they say that he is the Mighty God, not the Almighty God.
The Almighty God.
Yeah. So, now, do you remember what the problem was with that? There's a very serious problem with that argument. Yeah, the problem was the title the Mighty God is always used of Jehovah everywhere else in the Bible. So this is not some sort of lesser deity. The Mighty God is Jehovah. He is the Mighty God. That's in Isaiah 10:21, in Jeremiah 32:18, Deuteronomy 10:17. Jehovah himself is the one who is the Mighty God. So now, so we have these five titles here: Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Some people say that Wonderful and Counselor should be one title, not two, but the accents of the Hebrew text indicate that it is two, and God has perfectly preserved his words, consonants, vowels, and accents. So it is Wonderful and Counselor. Now, here, he's the one who Israel needs to be trusting in. Now, when it says his name shall be called these things, this is indicating that he actually is what he is called. It's not just saying people are going to call him this, but they're wrong. You know, they really shouldn't call him this. That obviously doesn't fit the context. But it's like in Isaiah 1:26 or Hosea 1:10, where people are called holy or whatever. There they actually are what they're called. So here the Messiah is what he's called in this passage. He actually is this. So these items describe his nature. These are titles which designate his attributes. So he is actually these things, what he's characterized by. Now, he's wonderful. First of all, here he's wonderful, and he is a counselor. The word wonder here, I think we mentioned this earlier, but the word wonder here, it's related to the word in Judges 13:18, where the angel of Jehovah said, "My name is secret or wonderful." So here the Messiah is this wonderful counselor. So my name here is wonderful to beyond human comprehension. Now, if you take a look at Isaiah, you keep and in Judges, so the angel of Jehovah was wonderful in his name, and he also does a wonderful thing, another word that's related in Judges 13:20, what he does in going up in the flame of the altar. Has another form that's related. Now, this word is either always, or at least the vast majority of the time, something that relates to actions of Jehovah. This term for wonderful, found in Isaiah 9:6. Now, an instructive example of its use is in Isaiah 28:29. Isaiah 28 and 29, very similar to Isaiah 9:6, gives you a little book context. As we've said a number of times, a text without a context is a pretext. And Isaiah, under inspiration, wrote the whole book of Isaiah, so seeing how titles are used in the book itself is going to be valuable. So Isaiah 28:29 says, "This also cometh forth from the Lord of hosts, which is wonderful in counsel and excellent in working." Wonderful in counsel, those are, again, terms that are very similar to those in Isaiah 9:6. And here we can see that Jehovah is the one who is wonderful in counsel. So, not only does the mighty God in Isaiah 9:6 designate Jesus as deity, but so does designating him as the wonderful counselor. Those are also terms that designate this Son, who is obviously truly human. He's born, but he's also deity, not just from being called the mighty God, but also from being called the wonderful one, and the one who has this ability to divinely counsel. So this one who is going to be the Davidic ruler, the child or son, will govern with a wisdom, which is the wisdom of God himself, because he is himself divine. Now, a little bit more on the title of the mighty God. That is, in Hebrew, it's El Gibor. Gibor is the mighty, and El is God. And so, an El in Emmanuel in Isaiah 7:14 was also the title used in chapter 7 to designate the Messiah's deity. And so he was there, Emmanuel, with us, El, God. So God with us is also El Gibor, the mighty God. This title here is a messianic title designating his deity. You don't need to turn there, but in Psalm 45, which Hebrews 1 says is a messianic psalm about the Messiah, in Psalm 45, the Messiah is designated as Elohim, as God in verse 6 and 7. We're going to see that in Hebrews 1. We talked about that a little bit before, too, I think. But in verse 3, the God is also called Gibor, in the mighty. So the word for mighty is also found in Psalm 45 for the Messiah as God, just as it is in Isaiah 9:6. So when the Messiah is called the mighty God, it's specifically designating him as deity, as Jehovah, specifically with reference to the divine might of the deity. He is the one who has power. God as powerful. In that way, he is the mighty God. So the Messiah governs with divine wisdom. He's wonderful, and he is a glorious counselor, and he also exercises the divine might. So he has the divine wisdom, and he has the divine might. So he has the wisdom to govern well, and the counsel to do so, and he has the power to execute these things. And in terms of how this fits into the context in Isaiah's day, Isaiah was trying to encourage Israel to trust in the Messiah for deliverance, not in the Assyrians or the Syrians or anyone else. And the Messiah is worthy of trust. He's the wonderful counselor who is the mighty God. Now, then we have the term everlasting Father. This term, you could also translate it Father of eternity, but it's, I'll put up the Hebrew for that too. It's Avi Ad. Avi is Father, and Ad is eternity. So he's the everlasting Father. Now, this term, the term for everlasting, does indeed indicate that it is, the Messiah exists eternally. In Isaiah 45 and verse 17, for example, Isaiah 45 and verse 17, you have this word for everlasting used, where it says, Israel shall be saved in the Lord with an everlasting salvation, ye shall not be ashamed nor confounded in the world without end. Same thing in 57:15. So this is indicating the Messiah's rule is going on continually forever. It's an everlasting, continual rule that's unending. And the context shows that as well. In Isaiah 9 and verse 7, it says, the increase of his government will be no end. So this will never end. His government will continue. Now, we talked about this in the discussion of modalism. When he's called the everlasting Father, is this identifying Jesus as God, as the person of God the Father? Is the person of the Son the person of the Father? Is modalism true and everything we've been saying the whole time false? No. In what sense is the Messiah Father? How can he be called everlasting Father?
The ontological Trinity.
Well, no, it's not, well, no. Ontologically is in terms of the being of the persons, the Father and the Son are definitely distinct. That's an important, you want to know that, because this is probably the favorite text of modalists to prove Jesus is the Father, because there aren't a whole lot of them, so they have to go with this one. But the Messiah's rule is paternal in character. Okay, so he has, the believers are sometimes called Christ's children. So this is saying that the Son who is given has a rule that's paternal in character, and he views his subjects as children, and he wields his scepter for their benefit. I mean, you can have a ruler who views his subjects as slaves, and tyrannizes over them, but that's not the way the Messiah rules. The Messiah rules with the divine wisdom as the wonderful counselor. He has the divine might as the mighty God, and he acts in a fatherly way towards his people as the everlasting Father. And how do we know this is the case? Well, we proved it a lot earlier, but for example, there's a number of texts where, like Mark, Hebrews 2:13 and 14, the Messiah is I and the children whom the Lord God hath given me. So believers are called the Messiah's children in Hebrews 2. Mark 2:5 and Matthew 9:2, he addresses people as child or daughter. So believers are Christ's children. He rules over them in a paternal way. So it's not saying that the person of the Son in the ontological Trinity is the person of the Father. It's saying that the Messiah rules in a fatherly, caring way when he's called the everlasting Father. So everlastingly, he has a fatherly, caring relationship to his people. You have any questions about that? I don't think that's that complicated. And then the Messiah is called the Prince of Peace. And that's because his reign will institute and promote and maintain peace. So he will do that. That is how he is the Prince of Peace. And really, establishing peace over the whole earth will necessitate the destruction of all, well, from whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not from the sin in your members? James 4:1-2. So for the Messiah to really establish universal peace, he has to be able to destroy human sin. He extends his government to the ends of the world in verse 7, of the increase of his government, peace there shall be no end. And he does it for eternity, forever, verse 7 mentions. So really, even the fact that the Messiah can establish peace from one end of the earth to the other and utterly destroy sin requires his deity. I mean, how in the world can a creature that's not omnipotent establish peace over the whole creation, destroy sin, and rule forever and ever? That would be quite a created being that could do that. So, while certainly the main title that would identify Christ as deity here is the mighty God, the other ones also really require it as well. Any questions about Isaiah 9 before we go on to Micah? All right, well, let's go to Micah 5 and verse 2. Here Micah pictures a divine human ruler. So here the people of God are in trouble. Jerusalem is under siege. The Davidic dynasty is at a low end. Verse 1 in Micah 5 says that the judge of Israel is being smitten with a rod on his cheek. And now we have this messianic prediction in Micah 5 and verse 2. It says, "But thou, Bethlehem, Ephrathah," that's the region, Ephrathah, "though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting." And if you have a King James in the margin note, it says on everlasting, it says the days of eternity. So his goings forth have been from the days of eternity, and even from eternity. Now, this is a messianic prediction. Bethlehem is David's birthplace. It's the royal city. This ruler is going to come forth. He's the Messiah. The Messiah, according to verse 4, is going to feed or shepherd the people of God. He will stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord, his God. And so he is the one who is going to deliver them. He's going to be great unto the ends of the earth. So this is the Messiah here in 5:2. And you remember in Matthew, when the wise men came from the east, they asked, where is the Messiah going to be born? And the Jewish rabbi said it's Bethlehem because of Micah 5:2. So the Jews understood the Messiah would come from Bethlehem. So this is a directly messianic passage. It's not about somebody else, it's about the Messiah. Now, what in Micah 5:2 shows the true humanity of the Messiah? Yeah, he's going to be born in Bethlehem. I mean, it's an actual city, so the Messiah is going to be a man. He's going to be born in Bethlehem. He's truly human, born here. Now, what shows the deity of the Messiah in this passage?
Whose goings forth
Okay, goings forth
from everlasting.
from everlasting. Yeah, so he's everlasting. Oh, do you have a cold? No? Okay. It's not like you're sniffling.
Allergies.
Oh, okay. Oh, well. That's too bad. In the millennial kingdom, you don't have allergies anymore. But now, the people who try to go after this verse, they'll argue about the word goings forth, and that everlasting doesn't mean everlasting. We'll say goings forth is origin, and from of old, even from everlasting, is something less than that. Some people will say this is just talking about the messianic idea, and saying goes back to David, but the fact is the messianic idea is way before David. It's not a very good argument. Now, the word goings forth here, it's a feminine plural of this noun that's related to the verb to go forth, yatsah. And so here it does indeed mean going forth. it can designate the act itself of going forth, like it does in Hosea 6:3. So the act of going forth itself is appropriate to this word. Now, there's actually, in this verse, it says, "But thou, Bethlehem Ephrathah, thou be little among thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me." I'm going to erase these verses down. So it says, "Come forth." And that's actually the verb that's related to this noun going forth. So out of thee shall come forth unto me, whose unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth are from old, from everlasting. So this is the noun. Was it an adjective? I think it's a noun. The noun that's related to, these are the same root. They're not the same word, but they're the same root. Now the first half is talking about the human generation, the human birth of the Messiah. So the Messiah's human birth is in Bethlehem. And his divine birth, his divine generation, is his goings forth as deity are from eternity. So this is talking about his human generation, this is his eternal divine generation. Now, goings forth, notice there is an S on it. It says goings, plural, goings forth. I think that the LXX translated it as exhodoi, going like sounds like Exodus, going out, goings forth. Now, I think that the goings forth can include the appearances of the Messiah as the messenger of Jehovah in the Old Testament. But the goings, all those appearances in time are based upon his eternal going forth from the Father as being eternally begotten. So the goings forth designate the eternal generation, the eternal begetting of the Son, just like comes forth designates his human generation as true man. Now, from of old, even from days of eternity or from everlasting, then that phrase, people will say, well, that does not designate true eternity. It just designates a long time ago. Now, in certain contexts, the word from of old can designate something less than eternity. So from of old can at times, like for example in Micah 7:14, it does designate something less than eternity. But the phrase from of old is also used for literal eternity. So for example, if you take a look at Deuteronomy 33 and verse 27, where it says the eternal God is thy refuge. That word eternal is the word that is translated from of old in Micah 5:2. So obviously in Deuteronomy 33, it's not saying that Jehovah just existed a long time ago and then before that, I don't know, he came about in the Big Bang or something. He was actually eternal. So the word from of old can designate actual eternity. And also in Proverbs 8:22 and 23, and here actually, this is a text actually that Arians we'll go ahead and take a look at that. Proverbs 8:26, 22, 23. This is all we're going to say about this passage at this point. Now here, it's talking about wisdom in Proverbs 8, 22 and 23. God's wisdom. Now, you don't want to establish as the main point of your doctrine a passage where it's like a figurative thing like that, like wisdom. And so some Trinitarians will say, well, this isn't even about the Messiah at all. It's just about God's wisdom. But I think that based on the fact that Christ is called the wisdom of God in the New Testament, that this is a messianic passage where the Messiah is called God's wisdom. Now, if you look at verse 22, it says, "The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way before his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning wherever the earth was. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills were they brought forth. While as yet he had not made the earth, nor the fields, nor the highest part of the world. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the earth. When he established the clouds above. When he strengthened the fountains of the deep. When he gave to the sea his decree, that the waters should not pass his commandment. When he appointed the foundations of the earth, then I was by him, as one brought up with him. And I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him, rejoicing in the habitable part of the earth, and my delights were with the sons of men." So you can see that the Messiah and the Father actually were delighting in the elect, the sons of men who were going to be saved even in eternity, which is an amazing thing. Now, in Proverbs 8, 22, 23, the from of old designates the eternity before the beginning of the creation of the world here. So here, this phrase again is designating eternity. Now, Arians will say that Proverbs 8 is saying the Messiah was the first created being, but it doesn't say that. Now, there are certain manuscripts of the Greek Old Testament that mistranslate Proverbs 8 to say the Lord created me in the beginning of his way. But that isn't what the Hebrew text says. The Hebrew text says possessed. And so it means that the Messiah, the Son, belonged to the Father even from eternity. It doesn't have anything whatsoever to do with creation. He was eternally the possession of his Father, and he was from everlasting, from the beginning. So this is saying that he is eternal, not that he was created a long time ago or something like that. He is absolutely eternal. He is from everlasting. Now, this is wisdom, like in chapter 8, verse 1, it's the Lord's wisdom. If God's wisdom only came into existence at a point in time, what would God have been without before that time? Yeah, no wisdom. He would have been ignorant. So God would have been ignorant until his wisdom was created. So the very fact, obviously, even from the nature of the metaphor, God's wisdom is as eternal as God himself. All right. So you can't say, oh, Jesus is God's wisdom and it became created at a point in time. It doesn't even fit the analogy. Wisdom is eternal. God's wisdom is just as eternal as he is eternal. So the Proverbs 8 would relate to the Micah 5:2 here. So in Micah 5:2, the Messiah is going forth both from days of old, and then it says from eternity, it's from everlasting. The days of eternity would indicate the eternal past, the Messiah's eternal generation from the Father. So this means and the Messiah is going forth to create the world. His going forth as the angel of the Lord, his goings forth to providentially uphold the universe, are all based upon his eternal goings forth as being eternally begotten of the Father. So that is really what it means. It is actual eternity in Micah 5:2. Any questions on Micah 5:2? All right. Take a look at Zechariah. Zechariah There are around 71 quotations or allusions to the book of Zechariah in the New Testament. So, a lot of references to Zechariah. Zechariah 12. Now, let's start in verse 1, because the text without context is a pretext, and let's see who is speaking. So verse 1 says, "The burden of the word of the Lord, Jehovah, for Israel. Saith the Lord, saith Jehovah, which stretcheth forth the heavens, and layeth the foundation of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him." So who's speaking here? Jehovah. So let's see what Jehovah says. "Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in a siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. Though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. In that day, saith the Lord, I will smite every horse with astonishment, and his rider with madness. And I will open mine eyes upon the house of Judah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, The inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength, in the Lord of hosts their God. In that day will I make the governors of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood." This is like at the end of the tribulation period here. "And like a torch of fire in a sheep. And they shall devour all the people round about, on the right hand and on the left. And Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. The Lord also shall say to the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. In that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them,